Joseph. My sobriety date is February 3rd, 2019. Um, I'll start from the beginning, what it was like. I was born in New Jersey, and I was born to a great family. My mother and father participated in everything that we ever did, Boy Scouts, football, any kind of little league. My dad was the coach, or my mom was sitting there doing the concessions. And basically a very Norman Rockwell type of upbringing, and I was very blessed. And so the town I grew up in was very small. I played a lot of athletics. Our coaches were all in the police force, and when we were in high school, basically we were good kids, and anytime uh, we went out and did whatever we did. We were good kids and didn't cause any trouble, so no one really cared if we drank or if we were just, they called it, you know, growing up, you know, just shenanigans that you do when you grow up. But that's when I started drinking. And I was very fortunate enough to go to college. And, you know, in high school, we were drinking probably a 12 pack every Friday, Saturday night. And then, I wouldn't drink for the rest of the week. And then, you know, where I came from, um, somebody's parents were away at least once a weekend. So we always had a different place to go and quote unquote party. And, like I said, it was a 12 pack on Friday and a 12 pack on Saturday. But then it was back to business, practice and school and tests and whatever. And I was fortunate enough to go to college, and I played football in college, and I was in a fraternity in college. And I can say, looking back on it now, that's honestly where I believe I crossed over. I crossed the line into alcoholism. And, I'm not going to go into a whole bunch of stories about war stories about drinking, but I can take three stories throughout my life that can qualify me as an alcoholic. The first one was the first time I ever drank. I drank alcoholically. It was in eighth grade, and it was a sleepover with my buddy of mine, and we had a liter of Absolute vodka, and we drank the whole thing probably in under 2 hours. And the next day I woke up. It was a complete blackout drunk. Don't remember anything. And we woke up, and his mother was cooking us breakfast, and she said, "Oh my goodness, you should have seen Ginger, who was the dog, got sick last night." And I think she was just being kind. I think she knew that we had both gotten drunk and we both made a mess of the living room. But you know, um, we thought we had gotten away with it. And that's a large part of my story is getting away with it. And so, like I said, I was fortunate enough to go to college. Was in a fraternity, was in athletics, and uh, college revolved around drinking where I went to school. My freshman year probably started out, you know, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then it was, getting back to work. And then, joined a fraternity, so then it was Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And then by my senior year, it was just, I drank on a daily basis. I don't know that I can remember that I was drinking to get drunk, but pretty much every time I drank, I would get drunk. I don't know that it was uncontrollable or blackout every time, but I drank excessively for many, many years. So after I graduated college, I got a job with Ernst and Julio Gallo, and I went down to um, Dewey Beach, uh, Delaware, and I was selling wine. And one of the things was if you're a distributor and you sell wine in Delaware, we got a blue card, and it was basically I could drive with an open container. And so that's probably the worst thing that an alcoholic could ever have. And I remember story number two. I remember that one night I gotten out and gotten so drunk that I woke up on Route 95 on the left hand turnoff lane about 2 miles from the Newark rest area on 95, and I was changing my tire. I'd gotten a flattened tire. I blackout, drunk driving, hits the sidewall. I didn't hit anybody else. No one else was involved. Nothing like that, but still an absolute danger to myself and everyone around me. And um, I was awoken to police lights flashing. The flashing light and the siren spooked me, and I woke up. I had the jack in my hand. I had the crowbar in my hand, and I was trying to change my tire, and I couldn't do it. I was absolutely wasted. Uh, I guess I had the presence of mind to throw the car keys away, so I didn't have any car keys on me, and so therefore I couldn't get charged with any intent to drive. And the cops asked me what happened, and I gave them this big bullshit story about. I lived around the University of Delaware, so I said these guys, I met them at a bar. They all went to school in Delaware. I got drunk, and they drove, and then we got a flat tire, and they ditched me here. So once again, just getting away with it, and you know, uh, time went on, and I just kept drinking. I kept drinking, gotten away with it. I kept drinking, kept drinking. A few years later, I went up to New York City. I was working for a Swiss bank designing computer systems, and that's when I was introduced to cocaine. And so I immediately took to that like a duck to water, and I continued to drink and snort cocaine for 10 years, uh, nonstop, every day. And then, um, I to me, it was just a normal part of life. My life didn't seem unmanageable at that point. Everybody was doing it. I still went to work, worked hard, played hard. That was what I was taught growing up. You work hard, you play hard, and all the bills were paid, and nothing was wrong. My career was going well, so there was really no signs of unmanageability, regardless of how obvious the unmanageability may have been. I couldn't see it, and so that went on for years and years. And my mother passed away when I was 28 years old, and uh, that's when things progressed. I went into a deep depression, and I started drinking and using narcotics out of control. And the night that we buried, or the day that we buried my mother, I went out and I stole her car, and I couldn't handle it. And I went and I copped cocaine, and I went to a bar, a strip club, and I got drunk and I passed out uh, on the bar, just in excess of cocaine and alcohol. And I had my father had to come on the day that he buried his wife to pick me up from a strip club. And so that was possibly one of the most embarrassing and shameful moments of my entire life. And that did not stop me. And so I knew then, though, there was a problem. And, I wasn't doing steps yet. I choose to do a 12-step program. I hadn't started to do the steps yet. But just from my upbringing, I knew that I needed to make amends to my father. Just at this point, it was just an apology. I said that I was sorry and that it wasn't right. And I knew that I had been raised better than that. And he forgave me. Um, but this is when I was introduced to the rooms, and this was in 2003. Um, and so I started going to 12-step programs. And when I say I was in a 12-step program, I was really just on the outskirts of a 12-step program. I would show up, I would go to meetings. I even had a commitment. They said meeting makers make it. And my experience, meeting makers make meetings. Uh, People who do the steps recover. And I never did the steps. And I was in and out of sobriety from 2003 until February 3rd, 2019. I would have some sustained clean time and sobriety, and then I would go out, relapse, and drink for a few years, and then I'd come back and get 6 months, and then I would go back out and in and out and in and out. And this was because I never did the steps. I always had a sponsor that was a friend that never held me accountable to anything. I would, um, I was very good at reading and mimicking and parroting information. So I would read the book, parrot some stuff in a meeting. Everybody think I knew what the hell I was talking about, and I just went on my very way. It was all an act. I never wanted to get clean. I wanted everybody off my back. I didn't want to stop using, but I did want the consequences to stop. And so I thought if I could fake it, I could pretend, then somehow, this would be um, somehow this would help me recover. But that wasn't the case. And moving on, the last story I'll tell about drinking is it was January. It was 2018 January. Um, Through all this time, I had gotten married once and divorced, and when I was going to these AA meetings and NA meetings, I had, I was doing all the wrong things. I was, hanging out in the back. I was talking smack about people with clean time. I was made a joke of everything. Chased girls. I basically did everything they tell you not to do. Like I took every suggestion in the opposite direction, and I stayed drunk for a really long time, for 17 years. I uh, I had gotten married again for the second time around 2009. I had some clean time at the time, and everything was going great. And then just one day, I had no defense against the first drink. We were out. I said, sure, I'm just going to try a glass of wine. I haven't had a drink in a while. What could go wrong? And then that began 10 years of relapse, in and out, 30, 60, 90, not taking any suggestions, not sitting down with any kind of sponsorship, not doing any of the steps. And my life progressively got worse and worse and worse. And during this time, I would be at odds with my wife, and she'd kick me out of the house. So I was on the street. And then I would, it just progressed to arrests, unemployment. I was unable to maintain a job anymore. I lost a career over my alcoholism, drunk driving, you know, um, the list goes on and on. And it wasn't until um, it was, hadn't been intimate with my wife for about 2 years. I was out of the house. I wasn't welcome in the home. I was homeless for about 2 years. I was living on the F train in New York City, the Second Avenue subway station, F train, and I was living like an animal, and I couldn't get off the spot. I couldn't get away from the alcohol and the drugs, and that dictated my life. And I did a lot of bad things to a lot of nice people, and I was caught in the grips of an addiction that I didn't understand, and I had absolutely no tools, regardless of the fact that I had been around the rooms for 17 years. I had absolutely no skills to quit. And, I had always fought the God concept in the 12-step program. I always argued about God. I'd always argue with people who had a God. And I always talked down to them or belittled them, or, for reasons I don't understand. I don't even know. It was probably, fear based on my part. But it's just, um, was just at the end of my rope, basically. And I had been allowed back into the home. And so I was in Nutley, New Jersey, and I was sitting on a park bench. It was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and I had gone to the liquor store. I had snuck out of the house, and I'd gone down to the liquor store. I got 2 pints, and after I'd finished drinking them, I was just sitting on the bench, just saying to myself, I couldn't do this anymore. And that's where I had a spiritual experience. I did reach out and I asked God. I said, please, take this from me. And He told me to call him. I don't know that God actually spoke to me, but the idea that came to my head was call my sister and not to call my wife. I had been through rehab several times. I just went, got better, left, owed money, and used immediately. And anytime I had suggested going to rehab again with my wife, she had said, what are you going to do? Just waste more money? She's like, you're never going to get clean anyway. And she was, she's not wrong for saying that. Her experience had, everything that I had shown her, that statement was an absolute truth. But this time I had gone and called my sister because I knew that she would make me follow through. And she said, I'll be there in 20 minutes. And so I hung up the phone and terrified in a panic, I went um, to the liquor store and I got another. I didn't have any money, and I had known the guy that owned the liquor store for a while. And this is the last story about drinking that I'll tell. And I didn't know what to do, and I was just begging him. I'm like, please, I was like, I'll bring the money tomorrow. And he's like, oh sure. He's like, I got this old bottle of vodka up here. He's like, it's $10. He's like, bring it tomorrow, no problem. And so he handed me this like ornate old. It was a strawberry vodka, and it was it looked like a decanter, and it had a cork. And I guess he just he couldn't sell it. It was very very old. When I went to open it, the cork snapped off, and so I was sitting there holding a bottle that I couldn't drink. And in a panic, I just reached over to the guardrail outside the Nutley Diner, and I just cracked it on the guardrail, snapped the top off, and then just chugged the 750 milliliter of vodka because I didn't know when I was going to be able to drink again, and I didn't have any other solution. So I then, um, drank the vodka. My sister picked me up, and that was the last time that I had taken a drink. And went to rehab. Um, I was Summit Oaks, and I was there for about a month and a half, and I was started out dual diagnosis, and then I had graduated to a rehab. Went to rehab, acted like a complete maniac, got kicked out of rehab, went back to dual diagnosis, and when it came my time, when they said, okay, a month and a half is good enough for you, what are you going to do? I said, well, let's. I called my wife, and she told me that I was not welcome. So instead of just getting a train ticket, going to live on the street again, I asked them what their options were, and they said that there was a program in Louisiana, and I went to an intensive. It was an inpatient. It was a partial hospitalization program, but I have some outside issues, so this addressed my outside issues. I had a psychiatrist. I had a doctor. I went to 4 classes a day from 9 in the morning till 1 in the afternoon, and then I went to a 12-step meeting every night. And it was a 3-month program. And at the end of the 3 months, my therapist had said, there's no rush in getting out of here if you feel like you need to stay a little bit longer. So I took her up on that. And then so that happened every month. And I really didn't have any options. I had nowhere to go and I had nothing to offer anybody. So I stayed there for about 9 months. So I graduated a 3-month program in 9 months. And at the end of the 9 months, I also took advantage of the therapist that was there um, because they had nobody wanted to go see her, so she had a lot of cancellations. So she would always call me and say, "Hey, I had a cancellation. Do you want to come in?" And so I did about 5 hours of intensive psychotherapy every week, and that was a tremendous benefit for me. I'm not saying I'm any better or worse of an alcoholic than anybody else, but this is what I needed, and I needed it desperately. And every night I went to a 12-step program meeting, and this gentleman who had graduated the progressive program brought a meeting in on Saturday nights, and he was my sponsor. And he started taking me through the steps. And so this is where I get to the what is like now. And so while I was there, I went through the 12 steps, and step one is very easy. My life was all I had to do was look at the wreckage, all the arrests, the homelessness, the inability to foster relationships. I mean, everything about me screams alcoholism. I'm an absolute alcoholic. Uh, I'm just like every other alcoholic, but um, I am a true alcoholic the way it is described in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. When I take a drink, I do not know how much I will consume, and I normally need to be stopped by the police or a hospital or a judge or something of that nature. I do not have the ability to stop on my own. My step two, which was the most important step to me, I had my spiritual experience while I was sitting on the park bench. Um, and ever since that moment in Nutley, New Jersey, I just kind of just followed. Um, I want to say it's an intuition, but it's more like, I had basically drank myself sober. I had hurt myself enough, and I had the gift of desperation to the extent that I just never wanted to drink again. And it was not on my own power. And uh, my only experience, with God was arguing about it for 17 years in a 12-step program, and constantly relapsing and getting drunk. And then once I started asking for the help and guidance, and I tapped into a power greater than myself as the source of power, that helps, which in all actuality is what keeps me sober and gives me the ability to stay sober, because it's not on my power, and it's under no human power, but this power greater than myself is what keeps me sober. And so when I came to believe in a power greater than myself, and it restored me to sanity, and for me, the second step was the most important one in my program. Then number three, turning it over to that power, and that's just a constant effort every day, turning turning my will and my life, my thoughts and my actions over to a power greater than myself, to the God of I understand Him, and my life runs fantastically well. I try to practice humility and understand that anything that I do that is good is because it's a gift from God. Really, God is doing those things, and you know, uh, just try to practice humility in a sense where I can learn to take a compliment, because I'm not the one that gets the credit. I give all the credit to God, and that's what keeps me sober. And my life runs much better when I turn it over, when I turn my will over. And my four step, I got a lot of misinformation over 17 years about a four step. Everybody said that this was this most difficult thing. It's impossible. Oh, it's scary. Oh, it's so hard. And so that really just kept me from doing it. Um, I never wanted to do it because I heard all these horrible stories about it, and it was just a bunch of BS. You know, the fourth step is just you know a fearless and thorough inventory of myself. And the gentleman that took me through the 12 steps, he taught me how to do it out of the a big book, and it was a grid. It was very straightforward. List of names, list of causes, the effects on the side. I did all the inventories. I did. There are several inventories as explained in the big book. I did one for each, and that set me up for success moving forward with my 8 step. I shared my 4 step in a 5th step. I shared it with myself. My sponsor made me look in a mirror and do my 4 step with myself in a mirror. Then he told me to go out to someplace beautiful. He said, someplace peaceful, relaxing, whatever beautiful is to me. And then I read it to God. And then I sat down with him and I read it to him. And that was it. It wasn't this big, horrible thing that everybody had made it out to be. It was much ado about nothing. It was basically just an accounting of who I am and what I have done. And I admitted my wrongdoings to another human being. He gave me some information, and he sat down and he helped me pick out of all my patterns, and he helped to recognize what my character defects were based on the information that I had given him in my 4 step. And then we came up with the list of character defects and shortcomings. And, and 6 and 7 are tremendously important. I was ready to have God remove them. And in step 7, I asked him to please remove them. And I don't want to hold on to any of that. I really I enjoy the life that I live today, and I enjoy the knowledge of self. But knowledge of self will not keep me sober. It's the God of my understanding that keeps me sober. And I live in 3, 7, and 11 a lot. I have to, constantly ask God to remove these defects of character because I'm not really, sometimes I take my will back. So there's a lot, I do a lot of step 3, I do a lot of step 7, I do a lot of step 11, which is, keeping that conscious contact because I have the literature tells me that I have a daily reprieve based on my spiritual, um, pardon me, I have a daily reprieve based on my spiritual condition. And as long as I keep in fit spiritual condition, which takes prayer and meditation for me, and as long as I keep attentive to that, and I'm constantly, going over, reevaluating and assessing, you know, how I'm performing, then I'm able to keep that conscious contact with God and my understanding. And the closer I keep that, the better I do. The more well I get, and the more rewards, as far as sobriety come to me. Um, so that was the 6 and 7, and then in 8, I had made my list in step 4. So those I had the list of people that I had to apologize to. I made a list of all the people that I'd harmed, and I was willing. I was willing to make those amends, and I broke them down into there's these two guys, and they do a workshop on the 12 steps, and they suggested you can break this up into 4 categories, and ones that you're going to make immediately, ones that you'll make, rather soon, ones that you really don't feel like making, and ones that you are admitting to yourself that you're never going to make. And he said, start with the first list, and then by that time, you'll be willing to do the next category. And then when you have all that experience, you'll be willing to do the next category. And until the one, finally, when you get to the ones you said you never make, you're absolutely willing to make them because you have the experience and the benefit of, not the forgiveness of the other people, because I've had experiences where they haven't forgiven me, but I've cleaned up my side of the street, and I cannot concern myself with how the other man reacts. And that comes out of the literature. And so I've done, so I did that. I still have some 9-step amends to make because I believe that's going to be a lifelong process. And I just pray for the willingness that when the opportunity presents itself for some of these amends, I don't know where some of the people are. It's not that I'm not willing to make those amends, but um, when the opportunity presents itself, I, pray on a daily basis for the ability to have the courage to go and take care of it right away and to practice the program. And that brought me to step 10. Um, I admit, uh, I, I like spot check inventory. When I'm wrong, I promptly admit it, and through constant self-evaluation and assessing myself on a daily basis by doing the inventory upon awakening and my spot check inventory with my step 10, and then my inventory at night about how my day went, I'm able to constantly see where I'm at. And by doing that, I can admit when I'm wrong, rectify, and make amends. And when I make my amends in 9 and 10, it's not, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry I did that. It's, this is what I've done wrong. Um, and my amends, what do I need to do to make it right? And to be willing to do what it is that they request of you. And so that takes a tremendous amount of willingness, but the spiritual growth that comes along with admitting I'm not perfect, and I am only human, and I am fallible, and taking responsibility for my actions and how it affects other people. It's given me a lot of esteem, and it's helped me build my self-esteem and acknowledging the things that I'm doing wrong, and uh, you know, and seeking advice as to how to do better. And I had spoken about the 11th step before. I do a 20-minute guided meditation on a daily basis. The only thing I pray for, I do pray in the morning. I don't ask for things. I don't ask for stuff. I don't ask for a better job or a better girl or a better place to live. I ask for the ability to stay sober one more day. And that's one of the things I've learned over being. I mean, I've been around AA for a long time, but like I said, my Clean date's February 3rd, 2019. And so I don't have a lot of clean time, but for me, this is the purest clean time I've ever had. I'm working on 18 months as of this recording. On August 3rd, I'll have 18 months. And because I've done the 12 steps, and because I participate in my program, and because I have a sponsor, and because I have a home group, and because I have a service commitment, I've strengthened this triangle of fellowship, recovery, and unity. And I protected myself against, to the best of my ability, against the first drink. And, so I do these things in my 11th step to keep my spiritual condition up. And then the 12th step is basically extending the hand of AA down to anybody who needs help, any suffering alcoholic, in any way that I can. And I was a sick and suffering alcoholic for a very, very long time. And I kept coming into the rooms, and I went drunk, and I went constantly relapsing. And if it wasn't for the people who had clean time and had worked the steps and had sponsors and had commitment and who did the deal, what we call doing the deal, and they always just said, keep coming back. They said, keep coming back till the miracle happens. And so I kept coming and I kept coming. And my story, it took 17 years before I was ready. I was ready to do the work, and I was ready to stay sober. And, it's just a daily reprieve. But once I finally did that work, and if it weren't for those people, I wouldn't be here today. They kept encouraging me, and they kept telling me to get that sponsor, to do the steps, and to do these things. And I just dismissed them because I always knew better than everybody else. But, having taken their advice now and practicing a program, I'm very proud of my program. I'm very proud of my sobriety. And I'm living the absolute best life that I have ever lived in, in 47 years. And it is all, everything I have is because of God and because of Alcoholics Anonymous. So thank you very much. If this helped just one person, then that's all it had to do. Anything I said is based on my experience alone. Your experience might be different, but if you think you have a problem with alcohol or drugs, please come. The 12-step program worked for me. It may not work for everybody, but it's a design for living that has positioned me to be the absolutely most successful individual I could possibly be. And that does not equate to money, property, or prestige. It equates to spiritual freedom, peace, serenity, and general well-being. And I no longer hurt myself with use of an alcohol or a substance. So thank you for letting me share.